Everyone, please be seated if you are standing. Welcome back to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification Training course. We are here continuing in the first unit of the Peaceful Solution, the character unit. And we are in chapter 7 here. Chapter 7. And I hope everybody has been paying very close attention to these informative classes. They're meant to, as we talked about in the previous chapter, in chapter 6, talking about leadership and the importance of it, and how it mentioned in that chapter that from the very beginning of this course, you have been teaching your students leadership. And it's very important to understand that in changing the hearts and the minds of both ourselves, as the previous teachers, Chris and William mentioned in their classes, in changing the hearts and the minds of our students, we are also, as teachers, our hearts and our minds are being changed as well, right? Because it's important as leaders that we not just give instructions or give information to other people merely just to give it to them, but that we live by those teachings. We set the example that we are relaying, or the information that we're conveying over to our students. And when it comes to moral character, there is no shortage of opportunities to put these principles into work in our lives as we interact with one another, whether it be a teacher to a student, whether it be a parent to a child, or a parent to a teacher. There's a lot of conflicts that take place. I can see the difference, one of the teachers was speaking of before in regards to enforcing the principles that are taught from the Peaceful Solution at home. Even if the teacher teaches these things in the school, it's necessary that the parents reinforce these principles. And he was saying that, that reinforcing them is not, putting your hand down and threatening somebody to do something. Otherwise, they're gonna meet, or they say you're gonna meet your maker or something, But it is backing up, standing up for the principles that were taught, the values that were taught, the rules, the lessons, the concepts that were taught that will help to build a positive character. And of course, teachers are, the trainers of tomorrow's leaders, right? And it's important that we all stand up for these positive morals so that, never let them go. Never turn to the right hand or to the left hand, off of these lessons, like William talked about, not compromising our values, in any situation, right? Because we're going to be faced with challenges throughout life, and it's important that we help our children, our students, to set realistic goals. Whether they're 5 years old or whether they're 50 years old. You're never too old, or you're never too far into a situation where you can't turn it around, where you can't change, right? Some people, they feel, because you might be set to teach people who are older, right? Who have had a series of bad choices in life, and they might have the mindset in thinking that, I've gone too far, I'm just too bad of a person, there's no changing me, or as they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? But that's not so, as we heard last time from the last several classes, from all three of the previous speakers. Anybody can change. Change is just a thought away, right? Because a thought starts the process. And when we get the information that we can, think on, of course, you got to have something to think on. Just have empty thoughts is not going to do anything for you. But once we're educated and we think on that information that we've received, then we have to start valuing it and setting a goal in our lives, and to institute those changes step by step, day by day. And it's a challenge. Realistically, the day-to-day grind is going to be in your face, and can get you down at any moment. And it's important to remind the students that, yes, in your journey to develop and maintain a positive character, in your quest to become a productive member of society, it's not always going to be a smooth road, right? There's going to be many bumps. There's going to be many potholes, pitfalls. There's going to be many obstacles that you're going to face. And your confidence should come in the fact that you have educated yourself with the information, solid, truthful, reliable, tested and proven information that in any circumstance that comes your way, you can apply those principles to that situation and you can bring about a solution. It's like talking about maintaining a car, right? Like we maintain our character and so forth. Well, cars are pretty much, I mean, today's vehicles are pretty complex, right? But they operate on the same basic principles that cars were when they first started, minus, steam. No cars are operating on steam now that I know of. But they operate on the same basic principles. So when a problem arises, you just have to go back to the principle or the rule that enables that vehicle to function that was broken and then fix it. Reinstate that rule in that situation or fix that broken principle, and then you fix the problem. Well, it's the same thing with our character. It's the same thing with conflicts that arise between one person and another, or one group and another, or one nation and another. And this is why it's so important that we focus on improving our character and also training others to value improving their character, because it's this journey of 1,000 miles to make a change in society for the better, right? And as we're going to cover today, and we're going to, looking at teenagers, young people, as we wrap up this chapter 7 is kind of a summary, wrapping up the previous 6 of the first unit of the character unit here. And we're going to be starting on page 148 in You've Only Just Begun. But before we start there, let us turn back to page LP7D, and we're going to look at procedure 3. LP7D, and we're going to look back at procedure 3. LP7D, yes. Okay. And it says there, ask students how many of them have ever been on a trip where things did not go as expected. For example, a flat tire, bad weather, or maybe they got lost. Have students share some of their experiences with the class. And this is a great opportunity, because depending on where you are in the lesson, sometimes I know like here in the United States, it's considered a long weekend because they have a public holiday. And so a lot of times people do go traveling during those time periods. But in many cases, your class might have come back off of a break, spring break, summer break, winter break or something like that. So, I'm sure that they can relate to a lot of things because people tend to travel during those times, whether it's to see family members or they travel to another part of the state, country, or to another country, all in any case. But this is a great opportunity to get some input for them, because most of the times people do, somebody's run into some type of a setback in traveling. Have them share some of their experiences with the class and explain that life can be compared to a journey. And just as if they were going on an actual trip, they must be prepared for the unexpected, obstacles, and various influences. Okay, so they have to be prepared for the unexpected obstacles and the various influence. And remember, and we're going to get into that in this class here as well, everything in our environment influences us, right? Everything we see, we smell, we touch, we taste, right? Everything that enters in through the 5 senses is an influence to us, and even greater things, that we might not even realize, they are influences to us. Have students turn to page 148, which is where we're going to be starting today, in their handbooks, and read the section entitled You've Only Just Begun. So we'll turn back to page 148. You've only just begun. And if you see the little car down there, and it's got the, some rain, and you see it's got a flat tire, then it looks like it's got a flat tire in the puddle, anything can take place on trips. And this trip of life that we're encountering, anything can transpire, right? And so the goal is to not try to foresee every single occurrence that can take place in your life, But like I said before about having confidence in what you know, right? It's like you think about people who custom build, and it's a real big hobby. I've never been into it, but I've seen people talk about it, and people spend a lot of money in what's called off-roading, right? And they've got these vehicles that they'll take, and some vehicles are a little more popular than others, and they'll take them and they'll put the raised suspension on them and the knobby tires and the reduced gears and winches and all these different accessories on the vehicle because for whatever it might be, off-roading, it might be something that might be park service or some type of rescue equipment or something like that. They want to make sure that their vehicle is capable of taking them through any environment that they might encounter, any terrain that they might encounter, whether it's muddy or rocky or sandy or wet or snowy, right? And the people who design these things, they're very confident that you can take that vehicle pretty much anywhere, right? And so it's the same thing, with our character, and what we're learning here, these concepts, these moral principles, it equips us in much the same way, but far better than a knobby tire or a winch, could ever equip a vehicle. It equips us in much the same way because we're going to be faced with bumpy roads. We're going to be faced with circumstances where we feel that people have disrespected us. We might even be faced with, a situation where we might not exactly know the response to give in that circumstance. But knowing how to control yourself and your emotions and knowing the process that you must take in order to find the positive response, that's a result of positive character. That's a result of being someone who is educated, right? And so it's important that we remind these things to our students because we really don't want them to go through life ill-prepared, as we mentioned in the very first chapter here in the unit here. But let's get on here. In the first paragraph, it says here, you just can't wait to be a teenager. And I think all of us have pretty much related to that. When we were, in our preteens, we couldn't wait to get, like Chris mentioned, the values. We couldn't wait till we could get, if it wasn't 16, it was at least, I think it was 15. I think you could get a driver's permit, right? 15 and a half or 15. I think I had like 2 or 3 driver's permit because mine expired before I got my license. But you can start taking the courses and you can get your driver's permit, right? And you can start training to learn how to operate a motor vehicle. For whatever reason, that was the big thing when we were teenagers, being able to drive a vehicle, right? I don't know if it was that way 100 years ago. I can't wait to ride that horse, I don't know if it changed over the years. I would imagine that children who see adults doing certain things, they want to emulate, they want to imitate those practices, whether it was a wagon or a mule or a horse or whatever it was. But you can't wait until you can get old enough. You can't wait until you get 16. And then when you're 16, you can't wait till you're 18. And then when you're 18, you can't wait till you're 21, right? And I don't know if people wait for anything after that. Most of the time after that, it's like, oh man, I was 20 again. It kind of goes back in reverse, But after 21, you're considered, well, you can pretty much do anything. You can drink alcohol. You can rent a car without paying an extra expense. Well, that's 25. But I mean, there's a lot more doors that seem to be open in the United States, not the presidency. I think you have to be at least 35 for that. But there's a lot of opportunities that are open. And so this is the mindset as young people get to that age, that, the precipice of that teenage years, they're very excited, because they're looking for a little bit more, as we talk here, finally some independence, right? A little bit of freedom. You might even get to make a few decisions on your own. Your parents might give you a little more responsibility because you're becoming of age where you should be accountable for your choices and responsible enough to handle more responsibilities. Now, I say should be because there are some people who are in their 30s and 40s who are still not responsible to handle certain jobs and things like that. But it's not because they can't, it's just because they have not been taught. So considering everything that's going on and what, hopefully a parent has trained their child to value certain things such as honesty and reliability and responsibility and so forth, a child they can handle more. The teen years are something everyone looks forward to because they mark the beginning of the journey to adulthood. And although it might seem that you are ready to be an adult, the truth is you have only just begun. And I think a lot of teenagers, go through that phase of, pre-adult phase of knowing pretty much everything, right? Including more than even their parents know, but that's not certain. That's how they feel in their mind. That's how we felt in our minds when we were younger, because in our minds we felt, when I grew up in the 80s and in the 90s, and by the time I became a teenager, I thought, well, it was different back in the 50s and the 60s. We've got color television now. We've got electric windows in our cars. It's just so many things were in our minds seem like when our parents were children, it was like eons ago. And our children today, they have so many things to distract them from building a positive character that they think that their parents don't understand the things that they go through. Well, irregardless of the time, the technology that's around, the problems with humanity remain the same because they hinge upon character, right? And the education that was presented to a person in their early years and throughout life. And it falls into one of two categories, positive or negative. So it doesn't matter if you're, living in a tent out in the desert, or you're living in a high rise in a big city. People make choices based on the character and what they've been taught throughout their life. And so it says here, you have only just begun. You have only just begun to live, to experience life, notice. And remember how we talked about those experiences and how those experiences, they shape our character. Hold your place there, and let's go back to page 4 real quick. Chapter 1, page 4. Because we can't negate or neglect the experiences that we've encountered throughout our life, because we might not necessarily consider something important until years down the road, and how we learned a lesson, and we might not even learn that lesson until it was years down the road, right? But our experiences are there to help us in developing our character. And as parents and as teachers, remember, we kind of have a little bit of control over the class, over the environment. And we should try to provide a positive educational experience for our students, right? Something in which they can grow in a positive direction, kind of give them a fertile soil so that as the seeds are planted in their mind, they can grow and yield beneficial fruits. But on page 4 in chapter, this is chapter 1, in the first paragraph under character, everyone has it, but where does it come from? It says, our character defines what is important to us, what we believe in, and how we treat others, just as clearly as our faces and voices define who we are physically. Excuse me. In fact, our character is is an integral part of who we are. Whether the character we have is positive or negative depends upon many different factors. Now, these factors includes, and we've covered this before in several places, genetics, family values, influences, and experiences. Notice they're the experiences, choices, and environment. And together, they help to mold and shape our characters. So from the very time we were born, and even as we've mentioned before, and the scientific studies come out to back it, or have been out for quite some time to back it, a child can actually start learning in the mother's womb, right? And they can actually start experiencing things in the mother's womb. Anxiety, for one thing, agitation. A lot of children have been born dependent on certain substances. And I mean drugs. Not because the child took it, but because the mother took it. right? And it affected the child. That's an experience that that child had. Sometimes the mother might have been abused while that child was in the womb. Those are experiences. Now, that child has no control over those experiences, but it is still something that shapes and molds and contributes to the development of that person's character. And so we have to take these things into consideration. Let's look back over to page 148 there. It says you've only just begun to live, to experience life, and to gain insight and wisdom, yet to gain the insight and wisdom needed to become a productive member of society. And if you remember what we covered there, let's again look back to page LP1C. Now remember what we covered at the very beginning here, because we're talking about the child, the teenager, just beginning to live and experience life and to gain the insight and wisdom needed to be a productive member of society. What we talked about here on LP1C there, children are pretty much ill-prepared to deal with these things. I'm on LP1D. There we go. LP1C. And if we look at that note to the teacher there under more than meets the eye, it says, how often do we as adults confuse someone's personality, that is, how they present themselves to others, with their character, that is, their morals and ethics? Do you ever catch yourself saying, he seemed like a nice person, or I never thought she would do that? Well, yes, even as adults, we can mistake a pleasant personality for a positive character. And here in this, of course, this chapter kind of laid the foundation for understanding the difference between character and personality and the importance of developing a positive character. It says, if this can occur to us as adults, how much more likely can it occur to our children? Well, of course, they're going to be faced with the same challenges that we as adults are faced with, right? Because they're going to interact with people just as we as adults interact with people on a daily basis. Look at the next paragraph there. It says, it is a known fact that at the onset of adolescence, children begin to seek acceptance outside of the family unit and identify more with their friends. And as it was mentioned in the previous class by the previous teachers, that as we get into this next unit, you'll see how we start to stress on the importance of acceptance and what it means to accept yourself and others. It's important not to confuse acceptance with agreement. Okay, just because you accept someone and who they are doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with their negative character traits. Okay, it doesn't mean you have to agree with their influences that they're trying to influence you and others to do. Okay, you accept them as a part of the human society that deserves to have the same opportunity to be trained in positive moral values so that they can make choices that will benefit themselves and others as well. And it's a whole, it's just kind of in a nutshell, 10 words or less, but that book covers and goes into detail about what it truly means to accept yourself and others. So it says here, it is this need to belong and to be accepted by their peers, and we covered that in talking about, peer pressure and conformity under the chapter on influences, chapter 3. It is this need to belong and be accepted by their peers that often puts children in a vulnerable position. Too often, and here's the point that I'm wanting to make here, too often are children arrived at this most crucial point in their lives ill-prepared to be cautious about their friends and those they associate with. Okay, they're ill-prepared. Well, this is what we're going to talk about this evening, because one of the important factors in being able to make it through life and have a successful life is being prepared. One of the keys, I believe it's the way it's worded exactly, is to be prepared. At times like these, they are less likely to choose people with a positive moral character with whom to build strong, lasting friendships, opting rather to get close to those who offer only fun and excitement. And this, of course, makes them susceptible to negative peer pressure and risk-taking behaviors. And, that's important because, I was thinking before I came up here for class that it's important to have a strong positive support system, right? The people who you interact with, they become your support system, and they can make or break you, contribute to that, depending on who you choose to surround yourself with. The kind of natural form of flow from water to pressure to temperature, to electricity is from a higher source to a lower source. Water flows from a high position to a low position, and it seeks its own level. A higher amount of electricity will flow to something that has a lower amount or zero electricity, right? Same thing with air pressure. If you open the door, mom used to say, you're letting the cold air in. Well, really, you were letting the hot air out, because that's the law of thermodynamics. But we should think about that when it comes to our friends. We should think about that when we befriend somebody else. We want to give them a benefit. We want to be beneficial to them and supportive of them in the positive moral principles that we've been taught, right? We want to surround ourselves with people who we, of course, can build up, but also they can build us up and encourage us as well. Okay, so that's why it's important to choose your friends wisely. That's why it's important to encourage our students, our young men and women, and our old men and women to choose their friends wisely, because those people are going to be a powerful influence into who they become as they move forward in life. So we talked about that, children being ill prepared and ill equipped to make right choices, to face these things in life. Let's look at I know we covered this last time, but let's look at that last sentence there, where it says, "You have only just begun to live and experience life and to gain insight and wisdom needed to become a productive member of society." And I had this, I had notes from the previous class where we talked about insight, but I went on ahead and took the definition down again just to refresh our memory. And if anybody is joining us for the first time, the word insight is a noun, and it simply means an instance of apprehending, all right? Apprehending, like the word apprehending, of course, means different things in different situations, but in regards to the mind, it means to understand or perceive, all right? So the instance of understanding or perceiving the true nature of a thing, all right? And it's important that as we interact with people, and as we're going to learn in the next chapter, in choosing friends, that we really take the time to get to know who they are, why, so we can understand their character. We can see what type of influence they're going to be on us, and in understanding that, knowing how powerful influences are, and influences can change what we value, right? And anything that can change our values has the potential to change what our character will become. So we take into consideration, how we will choose and how much time we'll choose to interact with that person, because if hopefully, we are valuing our character and we're on the right track. We want to stay on that. We don't want anything to shake us off track. Like the previous teacher said, you don't want to avoid a person just because you want to make yourself look better than them, or because you don't like them, but because you're in hopes that they will see and value, your friendship, and of course, the things that you've been talking to them about as far as building a positive character, and make the changes in their lives to start turning their series of decisions around and building a positive character. So anyway, it says the instance of apprehending the true nature of a thing. It also says, one of the definitions is a penetrating mental vision or discernment, the faculty of seeing into inner character. I thought that was an interesting part of that definition, the faculty of seeing into inner character. So looking beyond the outside, right? Looking beyond the outside, or what is presented as the personality of the individual, like was William presented. Somebody could just get through yelling and screaming at somebody, and maybe even slapping them around, and then they get a phone call, hey, the president of the company is on the line for you. Oh, hello, sir. How are you doing this evening? And just that quick, they can turn their that shiny, bright personality on to make a person think that they're a pleasant and acceptable person to be around. But a person who has insight won't be fooled by that golden apple that we saw in the last class, they'll take the time to get to know the person, right? It doesn't mean you're going to be, like, well, I don't believe you're really a nice person. You're just probably putting on a show, right? Because some people are genuinely kind of bubbly people, I know people that they will kind of get upset because I've worked in various places. I've worked a few factory jobs in the past, and some of the people that work at factories, for them it's just a paycheck. It's just go in, they do the same thing every day, every hour. They take their break, they take their lunch, they do it again, they go home, they clock out, they go home, they come back, they do it again. There's no joy or excitement. It's just a robotic movement. But some people will come in and a new person will come in and they'll have a genuinely bubbly, upbeat personality, and there's nothing wrong with that, And they'll go, geez, a morning person, don't bring that bubbly stuff around me, I've heard them say, well, that'll wear off in 3 weeks, once you get into the drudgery of this miserable place, I've never understood why people who were in jobs, that they felt were so miserable, why they didn't just change. Why they didn't just go get a different job? Why go to work and be miserable and make everybody else's day miserable? Well, they haven't been taught, I guess. They haven't been taught, they haven't been trained that, hey, just like you signed up and fill out an application for that job, you can go sign and fill out an application for another job. Move on to a different place, find something that you like to do. But anyway, the first thing they could do is get rid of that pessimistic attitude, and their work environment probably will change, at least for them. But it says the faculty of seeing into the inner character or underlying truth. Let's see here, these other definitions. It says also an understanding of the motivational forces behind one's actions, thoughts, or behavior. And it says self-knowledge here. And I thought that was a pretty interesting part of that definition there, because it says an understanding of the motivational forces. When you think about the word force or forces, from a non-physical point of view, the word that should come to your mind that would be a synonym to it should be influences, right? Influences, a force that, because, peer pressure is like a force, but it's not a physical force. It's an influence and the desire to conform to something else. Okay, and people can put pressure on one. A lot of times, like it was said, we put that pressure on ourselves, to conform and to fit in. But when you understand the forces behind one's actions, notice that what we talk about here, their behaviors and actions could be the same thing, but actions, thoughts, or behavior. And like I said before, understanding the principles of how something operates. And in this case, we're talking about how mankind, how humankind interacts with one another, because that's what this program is designed to do, is to bring about peaceful interactions between, a man and his neighbor, or family, or children, or students, or co-workers, or whoever it is, to bring about peaceful interactions. So when you understand what's behind a person's negative choices, like I said before, when you understand the rules, you understand the application, you'll know what you need to do to fix it. You'll know, hey, this principle is missing here. Somebody's missing, the character trait of responsibility, or he's lacking the character trait of self-control. Or not even externally, I'm lacking this character trait of self-control. I'm lacking this character trait of responsibility. This is what I need to do now, and start practicing this so I can turn this situation around. Okay? And so that's a part of what insight is. And believe it or not, the more you study the peaceful solution, and the more you put these things into practice in your life, you will naturally start to develop that sense of insight, to being able to see to the heart of the matter. I was listening to, I think it was NPR, or it might have been a podcast along that same lines. And they were talking about, the guy was talking about reading. He was talking about, today's society and how everything is text, It's not the genuinely or video. It's not people genuinely taking the time to sit down and open a book to read. And they was talking about some of the studies that take place with connections that are made and neurons that are made, and new connections that are made in the mind when people start to read. And he said, he noticed, because he did an experiment where he read one book a week for a year. Okay. And it wasn't any particular genre of books, but that was just what he did. And he said one thing that he noticed as he got into this, a month or so into this, he was able to make connections, right? He was able to make connections with the things that he read and pull things, from books that he might have read a week or two or three ago into and connect with what he's reading right now. And so the more you read and you study the material in the Peaceful Solution, or any book, but we're talking about character development and Peaceful Solution, you'll be able to pull information out and go, that reminds me of something I read and we talked about making them a VIP, and how it's important to value certain things and how strong influences can be. And what I see here taking place, there's obviously an influence in this person's life that's causing them to make these decisions because they're genuinely a great person, right? And so you'll be able to start putting things together and draw off of the Peaceful Solution and then come up with an answer to solve a problem, and that's important. I think one of the greatest powers, if you want to call it that a person can have is the power or the ability to always make a right choice. The power or the ability to bring peace to a situation, to a conflict, without bullets, without handcuffs, without jails and things of that nature, just with words, and examples. But that was the definition of the word insight there. And it says, to gain the insight and wisdom needed to be a productive member of society. The definition of that word wisdom was also pretty interesting as well. It says the word wisdom here, it is the ability to think and act using knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight. And that's just one of the definitions there. And then the Oxford English definition or dictionary defines wisdom as the capacity of judging rightly in matters relating to life and conduct. And that's the very thing we're talking about in the Peaceful Solution. Having the capacity to judge or to make decisions rightly in matters relating to life and conduct. Because the Peaceful Solution changes the heart and the mind. And how do we know that this program is working? If somebody was to ask you, how do you really know that this character education and program is working with your students? You would say because of their behavioral changes, because of their conduct, because what goes on the inside is eventually going to spill out on the outside through their words and through their actions. It also says, in regards to wisdom, soundness of judgment in the choice of means and end. So like we said, having insight and kind of thinking in advance, thinking like setting your mind in advance. Being prepared to in whatever situation you're faced with, in whatever conflict that you might be faced with or involved in or might be called to help resolve, right? You're thinking about the end result. You're thinking about bringing a peaceful solution. And it's our children aren't too young to apply these principles in their lives. I've seen many times where young people have taken these things and where there's a conflict, and that's something just as simple as, well, you know what? I'm just not going to argue. They didn't have to go back and quote from the lesson. They just put what they've learned in the action of two wrongs don't make a right. They didn't even have to say, you know what? Two wrongs don't make a right. I'm right and you're wrong. No, they didn't say. But they just said, I'm just not going to argue anymore. And they made the decision to at least not be a part of that conflict at that time. And they can go and talk to an adult, a trusted authority, or take time to sit back and think about what they need to do to fix it, and then come back and, make amends with the person. But they're not too young to learn these things. It also says here, sometimes less strictly, here, I got cut off my capacity of judging rightly in matters relating to life and conduct, soundness of judgment in the choice of means and ends, sometimes less strictly sound sense, especially in practical affairs. And it says it's the opposite to folly. It's the opposite to folly. We're kind of going off half-cocked or goofy about how you interact with other people and resolve problems. It also means knowledge, enlightenment, learning, erudition. And this guy here, I don't know who this Charles Haddon Spurgeon is, but he defined wisdom simply as the right use of knowledge, the right use of knowledge. Because people can have knowledge, but not use it to bring about, not use it morally. When you think about that word right, think about morality and following the rules. If you turn back to page 8 real quick, the right use of knowledge. A lot of people have knowledge, but then they'll use that knowledge to take advantage of other people. They'll use their great computer skills to hack into the Federal Reserve, right? Or hack into their companies or their schools. Some young people have hacked into their school records and changed grades on report cards. Now they had a great, source of knowledge. They had great computer skills. That was a great skill. They had knowledge, but how did they use it? What did they use it to bring about? Was it something that was in line with following the rules or breaking the rules? And that's what we have to always take into consideration. And so he says the right use of knowledge. And you think about right, and it ties into the word moral. The definition of the word right simply means that which is morally correct. That's the word they actually use. That which is morally correct, just, or honorable. That which is morally correct, just, or honorable. So you can actually substitute that word right there and say the moral use of knowledge. And then on page 8, which we learned from the very onset, at the very beginning of this lesson, when we got into character and morals, at the very top paragraph there in the second sentence, it says they are called morals. Values that people all share are called morals. A moral value is like a line that divides wrong behavior from right behavior. People from all walks of life, young or old, big or small, rich or poor, share some of the same basic concepts of moral values. And then we covered the 3 categories that morality can be divided into. And if you look at that first paragraph under those 3 basic categories, where it talks about moral principles. So we've got moral values and moral principles. It says moral principles in regards to human life means acknowledging and accepting that life is valuable and all people have the potential to contribute to society. When you have a moral attitude towards others, you accept and appreciate that they have the right to live in peace, safety, and security. And that ties into what we're going to be covering in the next book into acceptance there. All right. And so we see here where that wisdom or that insight, can come from as we learn these principles in the peaceful solution, and of course what it can lead to. You being a productive member of society, you being a person endowed with wisdom to bring a peaceful solution in any situation. You being a person of integrity who always internalizes and practices these positive moral values that's demonstrated through your actions and integrity. And the key word to that is consistency, being consistent in the decisions that we make on a daily basis. Now, is that easy? No, it's not, because there's a little something called, emotions and sometimes hormones and sometimes blood sugar, that can be an interference or an obstacle, in our decision making, but they don't have to be the determining factor, right? In recognizing that, we have to always go back to the foundation of what we taught and understand that we are in control of our thoughts. And if we first get a hold of our thoughts, recognize those thoughts, right, and change those negative into positives, then we can bring about a positive action. The words that come out of our mouth, the response, our facial expressions, the actions that we bring forth. So we should strive to always be in control of ourselves. All right. So it says here, these 2 things, insight and wisdom, notice here that next word, they're actually needed. Wisdom and insight are needed to become a productive member of society. Something that's needed is something that's a must for you to have to accomplish. Productive member is something or someone that produces beneficial results. All right, so let's look at the next paragraph there. It says, as with all journeys, notice here, preparation is the key. Preparation is the key. Have you ever been on a trip and encountered car trouble, an unexpected detour, or bad weather? I think about that every time I have to travel through Dallas, because it seems like there's always an unexpected detour through Dallas. I've been living in Texas for 14 years, and I've never been through Dallas, and there's not been detours or construction taking place. I don't know if their roads are just that bad or those contractors are that slow, but they're always working on the roads there, the interstates and the overpasses and everything. I've never been through there and not gone through some type of road construction. And sometimes they have to reroute traffic, right? And so when you plan out a route now, back in the day before there was GPS, we actually used to, when we traveled, we brought along a road atlas, right? And it was a book about this big, you couldn't hold it up while you were driving like you could a GPS, because you'd end up crashing into somebody. But you usually had what we called our co-pilot, right, or a navigator, and they would be the one who sat up in the front seat with the driver, who would open up the map. And if a detour did come, then we would have to go to that atlas, see what state we were in, see what county we were in, or what road we were in, and then reroute or recalculate, as the GPS says, another route for us to go so that we can get back on track to where we needed to be going, right? I think that's kind of a lost skill anymore. I think people would just pull off to the side of the road and call AAA if their GPS stopped working. The skill of map reading or navigating, I think it's kind of become something that's a distant learning experience. But those types of things occur, on the road. Bad weather occurs. I remember driving in tornadoes coming through, and having to park underneath an overpass or get somewhere safe because the wind was howling so bad that it felt like it was going to lift up the vehicle and flip it over. You couldn't see past the hood of your car. It was like being facing a wall and your headlights was hitting a wall. That's how bad it was. Did you get lost and have to ask for directions? That's kind of a joke with men, because men don't never like to ask directions. Wives always tell them, just pull over and ask for directions. I'll figure it out. Well, we're supposed to go to Pennsylvania. Why are we in Florida? We'll get there eventually. But there's nothing wrong with asking for that. That actually shows the characteristics of a humble person. Being willing to ask for directions, and it ties into what we covered in the last chapter in leadership. If you had a flat tire, were the tools available to change it? Were you prepared, right? And in dealing with this, I remember, because I haven't traveled, long distances in quite a while, but when we were traveling back and forth for, seminars for the Peaceful Solution here in Texas from Ohio, it was a long trip. I mean, it was not as long as Williams was, like 5 days coming from Alaska, but it was at least 21 to 23 hours to get here. And so we had to make sure that we had everything, that we had, the necessary extra fluids, washer fluid, or maybe a little bit of radiant coolant, a quart of oil or something, because those older cars, they self-change their oil, it leaks out, and then you just to put more in. Make sure we had a jack in the vehicle. So if you did get a flat tire, you can pump it up. And a lot of things that people don't check, make sure the spare tire has air in it. Sometimes spare tires will be under a car for so long, they go to change it, and then they go realize, oh, these are one of those run flat tires. No, you just don't have any air in it, so those things are important to make sure that you have when you go on any trip. Well, it's the same with our character. We want to make sure that we are prepared. And of course, this is an analogy to life in general. It says the time span between childhood and adulthood can be compared to a journey, right? And as adults, we can look back on that journey that we made when we were transitioning out of, our years of adolescence into our adult years, and see some of the choices that we made and how it contributed to the character that we developed and the subsequent choices that we made later as adults. Teenagers don't have that experience, right? And this is why it's important that they gain the insight and wisdom to become a productive member of society. And you know, one of the key ways for them to get that is through their teachers, you know, through their parents, because we've already been there and now we're sharing with them some of the obstacles that they need to be aware of, right? That they need to be mindful of, that they might not have thought about on a trip. It's like I heard I heard somebody talking about they were hiking in Yosemite once, and they were on the trail, and they came across the mother bear and her cubs, and so they slowly backed up and turned and went back the other way. Well, some other people were walking up the trail, and they said, "Hey, you know, there's a mother bear and her cubs up there," you know, and they were like, "Ah, it's all right." Well, about 5 minutes later, those people were running back in the other direction, you know. You know, they had warned them, they had told them, you know, they didn't have the foresight to see that there was, mother bear and her cubs, but someone else had already experienced that. So they were trying to impart knowledge to them so that they won't have to encounter the same thing and possibly lose their lives. And so this is what parents impart to their children. This is what teachers impart to their students, the experiences in life that we've already had and we've learned from, hopefully. Now we're sharing these things with our students so they can be prepared, because they very well might face those same experiences, or give them the information so that they could avoid some of those same pitfalls and traps that we went through in life. That's why parents and teachers are so very important. You know, never encourage your students to never disregard the importance of parents and teachers, leaders, you know, because everybody has valuable information and experience that they can contribute to someone else. Everyone does. But it's important that we not disregard the value that can be gained by going and asking, you know, a parent and teacher for advice or guidance. It says, let's see here. The time span between childhood and adulthood can be compared to a journey, just like a road trip. Things might not go exactly as you plan. Keep in mind that there will be detours or bad weather. Those unexpected events, this is what the bad weather will come, the bad weather and the detours will be classified as unexpected events that will really test your resolve to maintain your positive character. Let's just look back real quick to LP4A. 1, 2, 3, LP4A. Oh, that's 3. LP4A there. In the 2-second paragraph there, it says, in this chapter, students will learn that their character is one of their most important possessions, and just like any other possession, it must be maintained through self-control, consistency, and discipline. This chapter will prepare, so notice we covered at the beginning of this about children going through life and choosing friends. They go through it ill-prepared. Well, now we're not just giving you that knowledge. Now, as teachers, we're showing them how to prepare. The prefix ill just means not. All right, just means not. Illegal, not legal. Ill-prepared, not prepared. You know, illegitimate, not legitimate. So now they're being prepared. This chapter will prepare students for situations that could test their resolve to make positive decisions. And if you remember what we covered on that word resolve, it means to decide firmly on a course of action, to settle or find a solution. All right, to decide firmly on a course of action. And of course, we should have our minds firmly set on practicing these moral principles in any situation that we encounter. That goes back to page 80, I believe, in setting your mind in advance. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. I'm thinking. Yeah, setting your mind in advance. At the second paragraph under set your mind in advance on page 80, it talks about the next step is to make up your mind not to be influenced to do anything that will compromise your character. And the goal here is maintaining a positive character through all aspects of life. And able to do that, you have to be aware of your thoughts. And able to be aware of your thoughts and to weigh those out, well, you have to have a standard to which to go by, right? I mean, what benefit does it do a person to weigh their thoughts out if they don't have something that they can decide on and go, well, I'm weighing or I'm comparing my thoughts with, these moral principles, right? What I've learned in the peaceful solution, the moral values, the moral principles, the rules that I need to follow. All right. If I do this, will I be breaking the rules or will I be keeping the rules? Right. So you always have to have something to compare it to. When you think about a scale, when you talk about the phrase weighing your thoughts, a scale is pretty much useless unless something is able to balance it, right? If you want to, for instance, know how much this bag of beans weigh, or that it's the right measurement, well, you have to put weights on the other side of the scale. You have to put a countermeasure on there. And the number of those weights, the ounces of those weights, and that when that balances out, this is, 14 ounces or whatever, right? Well, it's the same thing with the moral principles. When we weigh our choices or our thoughts with the moral principles, that will help us to know whether they're right or wrong. That will help us to know whether we're in line or out of line with the teachings of the peaceful solution. All right. So it says, these things will test your resolve to maintain your positive character. Just as if you were on a road trip, being prepared means that you can successfully complete your journey even if there are obstacles that you did not expect. When you think about that, successfully complete, if you write down for your note there, page 29, because it talks about the character trait of responsible and reliable, because it's successful completion of doing whatever it is you set your mind to do. And that's why I try to reiterate to young people, it's important that you start thinking about your future, thinking about your goals, understanding your purpose, determining in your mind to set positive goals and the path that you need to take in order to successfully accomplish those goals. Well, the character trait in 1, 2, 3 down there on page 29, responsible, reliable, says always doing what is necessary to complete a task. And that's the exact thing that this is saying here on taking certain things with us or being prepared in life, making sure we have certain characteristics with us in order to successfully complete our journey, even if there are obstacles that you did not expect. And page 85 there talks about those very things, aka obstacles, curveballs and pitfalls at the bottom. Well, you can just read that whole page. Read that whole page when you get the opportunity, and you can make a note there at the bottom of the paragraph under obstacles. Refer you back to page 85, because that page talks about the curveballs and pitfalls, which are unexpected situations that can test your resolve to maintain a positive character. And so, like we said before, setting realistic goals are important. And it's also important to let the students know and understand that even though they're being equipped with the tools necessary to make life's journey successful, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be faced with challenges. The important thing for them is to set their mind in advance to be determined to meet those challenges with the moral principles that will enable them to get through it successfully. A jack and a spare tire if you have a flat, a quart of oil if you're low on oil, or whatever it is, using it as an analogy, there's a solution for everything, and you get that with these moral principles that are taught with the peaceful solution. But that's important that we remember that and reaffirm that at every opportunity we can with our students, as we teach them these things in life, because that when they leave high school, junior high, they go to junior high and going to get to high school. When they leave high school, it's really kind of a whole different world for them. They've been sheltered, so to speak, in school. Some people have, for the most part, they've been sheltered from the realities of life, the responsibilities of what they're going to have to do to maintain life. Why? Because mom and dad's been doing it all for them, for the last 18, 19 years, Now they have to understand the responsibilities that they're going to have to take on, and they're going to have to do it within a set of rules so that they can be successful. So they won't be stealing, they won't be being dishonest, they won't be being considered unreliable or develop the reputation of those negative traits. So we're going to stop right there on page 148, and we'll pick up on page 149. Let's take a trip as we continue on this journey here. Next class will be 6-2. It'll be 6-2 at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we look forward to having everyone, joining everyone here locally, and those who are joining with us online. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.